Welcome back to hour number 2 of the Gary Sutton Show on WSBA. And a lot of people talking based on the court ruling, or the court really didn't rule last week. They kind of sent it back to lower court decisions. But same-sex marriage in this country continues to have quite a debate going on. And I don't even know if it's any longer a question of just what you believe in. It's a question of, does the government have the right to force you by your actions in your business, for example, to believe in same-sex marriage, even if it goes against your particular religious beliefs or your moral beliefs, whatever they might be? With us this morning to examine a number of cases that are going on in the country right now that will illustrate some of this is Michael Geer, who's the president of the Pennsylvania Family Institute, and he's with us here on the Gary Sutton Show. Michael, always a great pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you, Gary. Good to be on with you.
You know, people can argue till the cows come home whether or not they agree with same-sex marriage or whether they don't. People base that on religious beliefs. People base it on other beliefs and will say, well, it's discriminatory to say that marriage is only between a man and a woman. So I know you hear that argument all the time, as I do. Yet I think where we are now, and one of the things that happens here is you say, okay, what difference does it make if someone else, and I've been kind of generally one of those, I say, okay, someone else wants to call it marriage, but my marriage isn't affected by that.
Right.
But it has gotten to a point now where we're starting to see an example of what happens when you do call it marriage, and again, it flies in the face of a lot of people's religious beliefs that, in fact, the government can now step in and do something about it. And that's where we come to you this morning. I know you've got a number of cases you wanted to lay out this morning that I think will be really interesting for people to hear.
Yeah, sure do. And just in the comments that you just made and your kind of setup to our conversation reminds me of comments that President Barack Obama has made about this issue. You know, when he ran for office back in 2008, he was an opponent of same-sex marriage and said that he thought marriage was a sacred institution that should only be between a man and a woman.
Right.
He obviously evolved over that, as he would say. I think it was February of 2 years ago that he said, he's evolved on that issue and now supports same-sex marriage. But even in that statement, he then said, but there are people of goodwill with different opinions on this issue, and everyone should be treated with respect. Yet what we have seen in jurisdictions all over the country, now coming to Pennsylvania, with the onset of court-ordered same-sex marriage and laws, so-called anti-discrimination laws that go with it, are that people who do hold to the traditional long-standing definition of marriage as between one man and one woman are being prosecuted by the government, being fined, put out of business, told they have to go through re-education classes, government-sponsored, diversity training, because they have to get with the program. So that flies in the face of kind of the historic understanding in this country of tolerance, of letting people have different views, of religious liberty, of liberty of conscience, and it flies in the face of what President Obama not all that long ago said about people have differing views, and we ought to respect those different views. When the heavy hand of government comes down on people, that is certainly not respecting different points of view and is not reflective of anything close to being called diversity. And so that's the troubling thing we're seeing, and I can run through a number of these cases.
Give us kind of a little Rand McNally around the country here, and some of the cases that are happening in different places that may have flown beneath the radar for a lot of people. And go ahead, take it away.
Well, first off, just talking about the wedding business, if you will, those that are engaged in using their creative skills, their talents to provide products and services for people who are getting married. These would be people that make wedding cakes or do wedding photography,
right,
or wedding dresses and those kinds of things. And there are cases all over the country now that are rising, including some I'll talk about a little bit later, right here in Pennsylvania, that involve this. One, a cake baker in Colorado. Now, when one goes to order a wedding cake, if you're getting married, most times people don't get married, 10 minutes after they walk in and order the cake. It's many weeks in advance, and they go in and they search around and find somebody who has the talent to make the kind of beautiful cake that they would like to have that reflects who they are as people. And I was not involved in the ordering of either the wedding cake for my wedding or for my daughter's wedding, but when my daughter and my wife were involved, it's a very personal decision working with people that you like their product. So it's an artistic effort. And so this same-sex couple went to a cake baker in Colorado. Jack Phillips is his name, Masterpiece Creations. and said they would like him to make a cake for their same-sex wedding. And he said he has, historically and with no problem provided products for homosexual individuals, with no question about that, but specifically doing a cake for a ceremony with which he conscientiously and religiously objected was too much for him, and so he declined to do that and recommended another cake bake shop that would do it for him. There are dozens of bakeries in Denver, Colorado that would be happy to make wedding cakes for a same-sex wedding. Mr. Phillips didn't feel in good conscience he could do it, and he has now been prosecuted by the state of Colorado. He is being forced to pay fines. He's been told that he has to force all of his employees, including himself, to go through these diversity re-education classes, and he's been told that he can no longer not participate, that if he's going to remain in business as a baker, that when a same-sex couple comes, that he has to provide cakes for them. Or in the state of New York, a couple, Cynthia and Robert Gifford, they live in the second floor of a barn. They took an old barn that was on their property and made it into their home, and then the first floor of the barn they converted into a facility where they hold events. So second floor is their home, first floor is their event facility.
Okay.
And they've had wedding receptions there over the years and a variety of other things, parties, corporate events, and those kinds of things. Same-sex couple came to them in the state of New York and asked them to host a wedding and reception in the first floor of their barn in that event area. And they said, no, we don't really feel comfortable as Christians, and our conscience just would not want us to have this event in our home and in the facility. It goes against our beliefs, and they said no. The state of New York has fined them now $13,000 and told them that they, too, have to go through the same diversity training. So, again, we see the same sort of situation where instead of leaving room for people who have true conscientious objections to participating in something that they think is wrong or violates their faith, the government is coming in with a heavy hand and saying, no, you have to get with the program and you have to do as we say. And there's more cases we can talk about, but that just kind of sets the stage. Those are just some of the most recent cases that have come down the pike.
I was looking at, I think there are, 27 states right now that recognize gay marriage, or 30 states, I guess, that are expected to allow gay marriage in the long run here.
Right.
But New York and Colorado are two of the states that allow that. And so what they have basically said is, okay, we have made the law to allow gay marriage. Everybody get in line, get on board with it. If you don't like it, you're violating the law. So if you, and I guess where the rub comes here, and I'm examining this with you, Michael, so I just want to throw this out. Yep. The rub comes to, and correct me if I'm wrong in the terminology here, but when you are providing a service to the public, I guess they call it a public accommodation, is that right?
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, exactly. Public accommodation. So you have a business or something that's providing service to the public.
So the idea that if you're dealing with the rest of the public and you're offering the product or service, you must now do so in this case as well, because this has now been legalized by the state and legitimized by the state. How do you react to that?
Well, I understand where they're talking about, and those laws historically came into being. For example, here in Pennsylvania, the Human Relations Act came into the existence in the, I think, late 50s, early 1960s, in reaction and in response to the unjust, wrong discrimination against blacks in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
Right.
There were situations in Pennsylvania, it wasn't just in the South, but there were places where, if a black man or woman went to a lunch counter, would not be served a hamburger, or if they wanted to stay in a hotel room, they wouldn't be allowed to do that. Those sorts of, gross discrimination based on someone's race were being carried out, across this country. And those laws made sense because that was unjust, that was wrong discrimination. There is no legitimate reason to say that a black person shouldn't get served a hamburger or a meal at a lunch counter or at a restaurant, or be permitted to sit in the bus in the front or the back, or wherever they want to sit, or have a hotel room or buy a house. That is significantly different thing than a situation where you're telling a business that they have to participate in a message in a ceremony with which they fervently disagree. And let me give some analogies that might help the listeners understand kind of how this works. let's say, Gary, you were in the business, in the radio business, you're quite familiar with advertising, right? I mean,
yes.
You do ads. The radio station does ads. That's how the bills are paid and those sorts of things.
Lifeblood.
And I'm sure that, at least I would venture to bet a lot of money that radio stations have standards and say, okay, there are certain messages that just don't fit our standards as a station to do advertising. Or if you had an advertising agency, let's say you were an advertising agency that was run by and owned by someone who is a gun control advocate.
Right.
Okay, so you oppose violence with guns and you think guns are wrong and whatever. And so the NRA comes to you and says, we would like you to design an ad campaign for us to promote the use of guns, and we think guns should be held, used in all these different situations. You say, it's very interesting, and it's your right as the NRA to advertise in that way, but we don't feel comfortable in business to use our resources and our skills and our creative ability to create an ad campaign for the NRA. We oppose the use of guns. We oppose, we're pacifists. We don't want that. Therefore, we can't take your business, but we recommend there's a good agency down the street. That's what has happened with these cake bakers and all these the wedding dress makers and others who have come under fire. As they say, we don't feel comfortable advancing this message. Now, in no case have any of them denied services to a homosexual who's come in and asked for a product or whatever. It's the participation in a same-sex wedding, endorsing a ceremony and an act that violates their conscience. And they say, I don't care what the government says. I have to obey my conscience. And the notion that the government can come in and order someone in business or otherwise to violate their conscience is, to me, un-American.
Well, and the question that has come up here, and I'm just pointing out the self-obvious, is the idea that conscience and law now are at loggerheads. Mm-hmm. And the idea, where do my beliefs come into play here? Where do my beliefs, can I operate a business and have beliefs? I know your organization just supported the Hobby Lobby case,
right,
where that very same kind of thing come up. Do I have a right as a business to have some beliefs on what I will or will not provide as far as a service? And that was a contraceptive situation.
That's right.
When we come back, I want to ask that question again, and I want to get a few more examples, because you had a couple great examples yesterday. Sure. One in Louisville, I know, of what went on, and we want to talk about that more with Michael Geer, the president of the Pennsylvania Family Institute, when we come back here on the Gary Sutton Show on News Radio 910 WSBA. Welcome back to the Gary Sutton Show on WSBA. We're with Michael Geer this morning, who's the president of the Pennsylvania Family Institute. And I just got an email, actually two texts. I'll spit this out again. Actually, two tweets. And you can tweet me, by the way, at Gary G. Sutton. They're from Joel Sears. It reminds me, Joel's piece yesterday on charter schools is going to be up at facebook.com/910WSBA. And we'll also be putting up Michael's time with us today at facebook.com/910WSBA. So if you want to hear it again, they're both great interviews. But he asked a couple questions on here, Michael, and he said, in most religions, marriage is a sacrament not subject to redefinition, although the Presbyterian Church USA did just that. And then his second one was, could you ask Michael about the rewording? Marriage is now a union of two people, traditionally a man and a woman. Obviously, it's changing right now. Your thoughts about Joel's questions there?
You mean first about the fact that some churches are taking different positions on it? Well, that's just, I don't know exactly what to say. I mean, ultimately, throughout history, people of different faiths have taken different views on particular perspectives, and what we have allowed in this country is the government to say, look, there's freedom of religion there that allows people to have different and divergent views on these sorts of things. So, for example, if right here in central Pennsylvania, we're very familiar with the Anabaptist community, the Mennonites, the Amish, etc., who don't believe that as Christians they should engage in combat or in war. And so they don't participate. They're what are called conscientious objectors, and the government has said, if you don't believe as a matter of conviction and a matter of your faith that you can participate in the Army or the armed services, you can perform alternative service in a time of war. there are plenty of Christian denominations who have no problem with their adherents going to war, but there are certain ones that do, and we leave room for them to hold to those views and to participate in society without the government forcing them to kind of get with the program, if you will. In the same way, most Christian churches, a very few, and it's only within the last few milliseconds of history that any Christian churches at all have suggested that the marriage is anything but the union of one man and one woman.
Right. So again, that's where you are right now.
Yeah.
You were, Michael and I actually played a little golf together yesterday, and it was a great day to be out there.
Yep.
We were chatting afterward. We had Matt Briette with us, and we were kind of all sitting around gabbing. And you brought up a case that I found fascinating, and it happened in Louisville.
Yeah,
and
I was wrong. It was in Lexington, Kentucky.
Lexington, Kentucky. Forgive me.
L's wrong. It's my fault.
Well, it's still baseball playoff season, so Louisville Slugger. I can understand that. But anyway, in Lexington, Kentucky, and we were talking about a case. I wanted you to share that with people because it's a case that really is fascinating to me, and I hope it will be to our listeners.
Yeah, it just came down this week, and there's a T-shirt company, a guy who does silk screening and printing of T-shirts. It's called Hands On Original. His name is Blaine Adamson, and is Christian and runs his business according to Christian principles. And over the years, he has turned down, when people have come and asked for him to make T-shirts for a variety of different things, he's turned down about 13 different customers saying, that's just not a message that I support. I can't really print that, and send them to someone else who's willing to do it. Well, within the last couple of years, the Lesbian and Gay Alliance in Kentucky came and asked him to print T-shirts promoting their Gay Pride March. And he said, as a Christian, that's something that I can't participate in or support, and so I'm not willing to print that message on T-shirts that I make. And he gave them the name of another company that would be happy to fill their order at the same cost with the same quality as Mr. Adamson would have done if he had printed the shirts. And that group then reported him to the Human Relations Commission in Lexington, Kentucky, and he is now being told and ordered by them. He's being fined and then told that he has to print T-shirts from now on, that if any gay customers with a message that even though he may disagree with them, he still has to print them, and that he and his employees have to go through this diversity training again. Now, again, to look at the analogy that many people make and say, well, you shouldn't be denying services to anybody because of who they are.
Right.
I get that. Well, Mr. Adamson, if anybody came and asked for a T-shirt and they happen to be homosexual, he will sell them a T-shirt. It has to do with what is the message on the shirt, in the same way that an advertiser, someone else, if a good friend of both of ours, Jeff owns an advertising agency, and he is a supporter of the sanctity of life. He opposes abortion. If Planned Parenthood comes and asks him to design an ad campaign promoting abortion, he should have every right as an American citizen and as someone engaged in the free market, in the public square, to say, I don't feel comfortable, it violates my conscience to do an ad campaign promoting abortion, therefore I say no. The government should not come in and order him to do that. We're not workers. We aren't employed by the government. The government doesn't dictate what everybody has to not only what they believe, but then what their actions are. And yet that's what we're seeing with the advent of these anti-discrimination laws and same-sex marriage.
And we've all seen some questionable T-shirts around from time to time. If you ever go to the boardwalk in the summer, and you'll see some really foul T-shirts.
Oh, yeah.
It would be like if you walked in and said, by the way, I want you to print this T-shirt with this word on there, and you say, I can't do that.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, is that any different?
It's not any different, and when people come to understand these situations, then they realize, oh, okay, let's have some freedom in this country. There are plenty of people in business who are happy to print T-shirts with foul language on it or with messages they disagree with which we may disagree. You and I might disagree with a message, yet there's freedom of speech, and you can make that T-shirt. But no government should come in and order somebody to print a message, whether it's a newspaper, an advertiser, a T-shirt maker, a cake baker, or anything else, to use their creative talents to promote a message in a process that they disagree with. That is not tolerance. That is not diversity at all. It is forced compliance with a viewpoint that many people, I think most people, still disagree with in this country.
Well, we continue to try to sort this all out. And, Michael, I appreciate you giving it some clarity this morning, some good examples. And, again, people can listen to this segment if they want to again tomorrow at facebook.com/910WSBA. Michael, I have a feeling this argument's going to go on for some time, and we'll continue to put it out there for people to look at whatever side they happen to be on. But I always appreciate you being with us. Thank you so much. much.
Thank you, Gary.
Have a great day. Take care.
Bye.
Michael Geer, president of the Pennsylvania Family Institute, with us here on the Gary Sutton Show on WSBA. When we come back, Congressman Scott Perry, on short notice, stopping by to talk about ISIS. Is our air campaign doing enough right now in Iraq and also in Syria? We'll ask Scott about that here on the Gary Sutton Show on News Radio 910 WSBA, where it's 10:30.